everyone. This is Marcus Grimm for Medtrics. Once again, I'm joined by Santhosh Cherian, CEO of Medtrics. Tosh, it must be casual day at the home office. You look great, man.
Thank you. You got my Philadelphia sweatshirt representing Philly.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you doing it even on a week like this where our Phillies dropped 3 in a row. Yikes. We're going to be talking today about AI, which always makes sense because you and I often talk about AI. Last week was a really fun week. OpenAI dropped GPT-5 on the marketplace. We're not going to discuss in this particular show, is 5 better than 4 or worse than 4? What we're going to talk about is the idea of seismic changes that happen seemingly overnight and what it means for companies. First off, one of the things that I think it's clear for our audience to understand is you are one of those people who has tested all the different companies, all the different models many, many times. At this point in the game, you haven't really picked your particular horse, right? You're kind of watching all of them as it relates to AI right now.
When it comes to AI, I believe the top 3 are OpenAI, Anthropic, and Gemini. Everything else is secondary. So those are the 3 that I'm monitoring.
And obviously, OpenAI owns ChatGPT. That's the number one that's out there in the marketplace. For a lot of us, it's been our first exposure to what true AI looks like. So those of us who've been using the tools, as these models get better and better, it's almost like a new version of when iOS comes out, right? You'll like 90% of it. 10% you get used to. Last week was kind of a big change in models, right?
Yes, last week was a huge change, but it was also a big screw up. OpenAI is no longer an early stage startup. They're a company that provides a service to large organizations across the world with billions of users, and people have built entire businesses off their tool. When you're of that size, you don't simply roll out a change where you delete all of your previous models on ChatGPT and says, here's GPT-5 and that's all you have. It needs to be done over time with proper messaging so that people can adapt to the change.
Now, for those people, and listen, let's face it, there are a lot of them that are using AI on a daily basis, but they may not really understand how much the model specifies your engagement with the tool. Just talk a little bit about the different models that were there more than a week ago and the different models that are there now.
For people that are using it a lot, myself, for example, the O3 model was something that I used heavily for reasoning and planning out different projects. For example, this year we've been through some refactoring of our code. When I was working with the developers, plan out some of the changes, taking some of the business needs and converting it into database fields and requirements, it was really powerful. For any sort of content creation, such as writing documents for our knowledge base, GPT-4 is a much better tool for that. So if you use these tools on a daily basis, you start to see their personalities and then use them differently, similar to the way that you would go to different individuals in your organization to do different tasks. And that's how OpenAI train the world to use their tools. And now all of a sudden they're saying, here's a tool that can do everything. And we're going to take away all these previous tools.
And it's interesting to me, and I think when we get into this big screw up here, is we're all used to technology upgrading. I've got a little reminder on my Mac right now that it wants to upgrade to the new OS. And of course, eventually I will. But I think as users, we're used to having at least a say in the matter, right? Right. Where it's, I can read about, here's how the new version is different than the old version, and I can make the choice whether or not I upgrade. That's not what happened last week.
I would even actually classify it into 2 areas. For example, your iOS application or your Mac is something you installed locally on your computer. You should have a say on whether you upgrade it. When it comes to SaaS application, you're not going to have a say in whether you upgrade. If you don't want to use it anymore, you can stop using it. The difference is that in the SaaS application, you need to give advance notice before you have a major change so that you can adapt to that change. And if you don't do that, then you're going to have a major problem with your users. And I'm not talking about small changes where GPT-4 had improvements that were made. This is an entire change on all of their services.
You mentioned an example as it relates to a feature in Medtrics where you recently went through this similar decision. Talk to us about that.
Whenever we have a new feature request from our customers, we have a meeting that we have every Thursday. We go through all of those and decide how we should prioritize them. One of the things that we consider is the impact to our customers. So if a feature is going to touch every single user, especially our student users and resident users and faculty users, we really have to scrutinize it and say, is this worth it? And also, is it worth it now? Depending on the timing of the year, the capacity of our team for the testing and documentation. And if it's not worth it, we don't do it. And for this feature, it was something that would impact all of our faculty and student users and resident users. And my decision was, it doesn't matter how big of an ask it is from that one organization, we're not going to do this right now because there's a risk to all of our users. I'd rather wait for next year when we have more capacity to plan it out and make sure we have enough resources to test everything properly instead of trying to squeeze it into one of the projects that we're working right now.
You mentioned that you were very cognizant of this because Medtrics works with enterprise organizations. You also work in medical education. So we're talking about obviously medicine. That to me is sort of some of your disappointment that you're feeling right now with OpenAI, right? Not understanding how things work in the enterprise world.
I say this as someone that experiments with tons of tools. I am an earliest adopter of all these tools. Like I will go in there and play with every product on Product Hunt. That's mainly because I'm also a product designer. This is also how I get ideas for different things. So that part is fine. It is great to put out these new things, but it should be done in a way that is not disrupting other businesses that are relying on your business.
Medtrics already has some AI features that are relying on OpenAI. You mentioned that decisions like OpenAI made last week, potentially some repercussions for a company like Medtrics, right?
Yeah, I had a meeting with our developers and our team. The general sense is that they trust Anthropic more, and I do too. When it comes to organizations, they're starting to look at Anthropic more as a company that's built around privacy and security and stability, which resembles Apple. They're known for their privacy. They're not in the business of selling your data. So when large organizations look at these tools, that's some of the things to consider. The company's decision-making process. Are they going to take care of your data? Are they going to make changes that is going to compromise your business? For me, I'm seeing Anthropic as a better partner to build our integrations with and build AI assistants with and so on. So it's something that we've been planning out a shift in the near future.
Really well said in that when we all start out with these new technologies, right, we just get excited about, well, can it do something new and exciting for me? Can it push my business forward? But at the end of the day, there's other things that come into play besides can that code do it quickly or more cheaply, right?
Exactly. Cost is important, but when you're dealing with enterprise technology, the cost of these tools are negligible when it comes to the risk of something going wrong for your customers. Paying a little bit more for an API from one service that is much more reliable and stable is worth it when you consider the consequences of something going wrong.
Santhosh Cherian, folks. He's the CEO of Medtrics. For everyone on the Medtrics team, I'm Marcus Grimm.